worked through the process now that I've got all the lumber staged in the right spot, and worked through the process and built one sample shelf to kind of understand the best way to set up the machines and the most efficient way to do it. So the process begins by cutting to the lengths, whether they were 8 foot, 4 foot, or 5 foot for the front edge of the shelf. And from there, going over to the table saw and ripping them in strips of 1 5/8 wide. There will also be 1 5/8 wide strips on the end of the shelf, which will be cut to a shorter length. Well, I started a new day today. Yesterday, I was able to rip all the material for the front edge of all the shelving. So the lumber pile of tulip poplar has really gone down because of the large amount of things that have been ripped there. But yesterday, when I took the test shelf that I built the day before down to the museum and put it on the shelf brackets, the concern was that the brackets were longer than anticipated originally. This is 12.5 inches how long the metal brackets are, and then that leaves a little more than an inch behind the shelf before the metal standard on the wall, and that gap doesn't look very good. So I'm going to revise the design. Yesterday, kind of worked out the details and basically take and rip an 1 1/8 strip to attach to the plywood shelf to extend it out. Here's a sample. So had to plane the strip down to match the thickness of the plywood, and then use glue and brads to put it on there, and that will extend the shelf material, which was probably a good way to do it, because otherwise we would have wasted a lot of plywood if we'd had to rip it to that width. So this will be a good thing. It'll add a little stiffness to the shelf too, so I think that's a win, but it's one more step in the process. Luckily, I was at a good stopping point, and I hadn't cut the side rails to length, or side edging material to length, because they're now going to need to be longer than the original design. So today's mission will be to get as many of these laminated on there and hopefully start working towards getting some shelving done. I've ripped the 1 1/8 strips for most of the short shelves and a few of the 8 footers. What we're going to have to do now is take about 45 thousandths of material off these so they match the thickness of the plywood when they're being laminated onto the back. So we'll start planing. The next step is to set up to nail the rabbet in the front edge that will go on the front of the shelf. So getting this dimension is critical to be match the height of the plywood, otherwise it'll create a lot of extra sanding. So put a sacrificial fence on the table saw fence because that will be right up tight with the blade, and I'll dial in the height with the dial indicator and make a couple test cuts to confirm we've got it set right, and then I can mill a bunch of front edge stock. The machine setup is good. It's been tested for rabbeting, so I run all the edge trim and side trim in one go, as well as we got the machine set up. So I'm going to get started with the short pieces and then probably get some assistance catching the longer pieces, just because it'll be a high volume of parts.